Yeah, welcome back. So in this teaching, we're going to talk a little bit about how there's very practical, well-researched, bona fide benefits of being happy, not just for the individual, but for whole of businesses. And maybe I'll start by explaining how happiness is proven to have so many big benefits for individual people. And it's crazy stuff. Like people's careers are much better, their incomes are much better, and Jackson's going to explain that in even more detail. But in addition to career success, we get much better personal health. Happy people live longer. They have boosted immune systems. Their heart rates are lower. You know, all kinds of things that are just practical, every day, there's a benefit. Happy people, this won't surprise you, have warmer, longer lasting relationships. No shocking bit of evidence probably required for that one. But happy people are actually smarter, which sounds bizarre. But the way scientists test for this is elegant and simple and yet really convincing. If you bring people into a laboratory and you prime them to have certain emotions, either sad emotions or happy emotions, and you prime them pretty simply. You put some people randomly selected to watch horrible videos, you know, images from the Holocaust or starving children, stuff that will definitely make you unhappy. And other people come into the lab and they watch videos of, you know, lighthearted blooper reels from, you know, sitcoms. And then once people are primed to either feeling lighthearted and happy or sad, you put them through a series of tests, you know, logic problem solving, access to short-term and long-term memory, and even, you know, creativity tests. And on all fronts, the happy people score much better than the unhappy people. So there's real concrete advantages there, and it even gets kind of sci-fi at times. Happy people literally have more peripheral vision. It's crazy. So I often work with, you know, blue-collar industries that have safety risks, and I say to them, well, who's going to be the person most likely to fail to see the hazard on the side of the workway, or fail to see the guarding up on some piece of equipment? Obviously, the unhappy people, unfortunately, become more susceptible to those kinds of things. And then finally, happy people have just more energy. Statistically, they actually sleep a tiny bit less because you go to bed in a good mood with relatively few worries and you conk out and you get good sleep. But if you're unhappy, and we've all been there at times, stressed out and worried, you roll around in bed, you get up and go pee one more time or whatever, because you're stressed out and you're not getting good quality sleep. Well, all these advantages, which are proven by science, accumulate to have all kinds of beneficial effects throughout a person's lifetime. And this isn't just one or two studies. What I'm sharing with you is what we call consensus science. And there was a landmark meta-study done. A meta-study is simply where you cumulatively take all the individual studies and say, what do they show if we're looking for the impact of positive emotions on good life outcomes? And cumulatively, you take over 275 different studies with over 200,000 participants. The science shows convincingly, there's no doubt about it, that happiness leads to more success. Now the tricky thing is, people sometimes go, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Is happiness just like this grinning from ear to ear and then we're all supposed to be bouncing around like happy people, you know, mad fools on a fun beach day? Well, no, that's kind of impractical. And if your workplace looked like that, I'd wonder what you're having in the drinking water. So happiness, the way we use this term, and I think the way most scientists do, is more than just that grinning from ear to ear. Happiness is any array of positive emotions. And so think of it this way. Happiness is an umbrella term that could mean things like joy, gratitude, serenity, curiosity, hope, inspiration, amusement, awe, you know, that's that speechless, oh my goodness, I don't know what to say because something's so amazing. Pride, when it's a healthy, good pride. And then finally, scholars sometimes even look at the word love as another type of happiness. And when they use the word love, which sounds too fuzzy and foo-foo, they really mean it's any combination of those previously referenced positive emotions. So whenever we're experiencing any of these emotions that I just mentioned, love and joy and gratitude and pride and all that kind of stuff, any one of those are what we mean by happiness. And when your workforce is feeling those kinds of pride, inspired, curious, joyful sense of impact that they're having in the workplace, you're going to get better results in your workplace. And obviously, naturally, when we're feeling those ways as individuals, well, that rocks. We love our lives when we're having all those kinds of emotions. So that's what we mean by happiness, all kinds of benefits for individuals, and it flows over very naturally to organizations as well.
Exactly, and that's what I want to pick up on, is talking about the bottom line impact of happiness. So how it increases not only the productivity, effectiveness, financial performance of the business or organization, but also your future earning potential. So as individuals, there are actually several studies on this, and one that we'll talk about quickly is this research paper titled, "Do Happier People Make More Money? An empirical study of the effect of a person's happiness on their income." And first of all, in this paper, what you find is that happier people just get more at-bats than everyone else. So not only are we even thinking about, are they more effective, are you more productive, but you are going to recover faster from illness, take fewer sick days, live and work on average 10 years longer. So you have, first of all, even just more opportunity to generate income. But data abounds showing that happier workers do in fact have higher levels of productivity, produce higher sales, perform better in leadership positions, and maybe not surprisingly, get better performance reviews. They get better feedback from the people around them. They also enjoy more job security, and again, fewer sick days, less likely to quit, less likely to become burnout. But this paper I mentioned from a researcher named Michael Cuomo is, I think, really interesting part is that in the study, the subjects' happiness levels were determined when they were young. And so this was before they had earned regular career income, and then they compared that to income 30 years later. And by doing the study this way, it avoids this problem of causality. So is it like, well, are people who end up just making more money end up being happier? But because they structured the study this way, they basically proved that it was in fact happiness at a young age that led to those increased earnings. So that's the individual, but we can also again talk about the financial impact of happiness or unhappiness in businesses and organizations. And in our work, we are very business-minded, very financial, and we're the first one to admit that some of these calculations are a little harder to get some concrete final numbers when you think about, the cost of your supply chain, right? You can map it all out, but you can still think about some of the main cost areas here, as well as the gains on one hand of improving your happiness and well-being in the organization. So there are 4 big cost areas to consider. It's going to be number 1, mental health, number 2, turnover and retention, number 3, absenteeism, and 4, productivity. So let's start on this kind of, what are the costs of mental health in businesses and organizations? Well, Harvard Business Review study found that 76% of respondents across all organizational levels reported at least one symptom of a mental health condition. That's pretty incredible. What's more is that C-level and executive employees were actually more likely to report at least one symptom. So no matter who you're working with, no matter how your organization's doing, there's probably a decent amount of costs associated with that. And to actually put a number to it, there was an independent report by Deloitte that looked at the average annual cost to employers of poor mental health. And they found that that number was approximately $1,560 per year per employee. And that's not just for employees that are actively struggling, that was the average across all employees. And what's more, that study was actually from a few years ago in the UK. And so you think about inflation, increased healthcare costs, healthcare in the US, pandemic, right? That number is going to be way, way larger now. And so for Fortune 500 company, on average, they have about 60,000 employees. Multiply that out and you get $93.6 million per year lost due to mental health issues. Incredible. So we talk about mental health, let's talk about maybe some turnover and retention, right? That's another huge category when we think about the costs associated with happiness and well-being. And this can typically range the cost of hiring a new employee from thousands of dollars, maybe for like an hourly staff type person, to 1.5 or 2x or even 3x salary for these most senior leaders. And the costs here are things like onboarding, lost productivity, hiring, unemployment benefits, bringing the new people, recruiting, training, and then finally even kind of the cultural impact. And so when we think about that, turnover is going to be another huge component. Let's talk now about a third category, absenteeism. You find that over 200 million workdays are lost due to mental health conditions each year. And when you factor in the total amount of global absenteeism, it ends up being nearly $17 billion economic loss, which is a pretty staggering number. And there's a really fascinating study out of the UK that looked at an average workplace, average in terms of this culture and happiness and well-being. Employees take about 6.3 sick days per year. However, at workplaces listed among the top 101 best places to work in the UK, this number dropped to 2.7. So you have nearly a 60% reduction that comes in moving from average to really good culture. Finally, we have productivity, and this is a cost, but this one kind of goes both ways, right? Because less well-being and happiness, right? You have less productivity. On the other hand, you can also improve it. But thinking about some of this cost, right? There's a study from Kansas State University by a professor named Thomas Wright who found that very clearly happier employees made better decisions, they had higher job performance, and one of these data points that I found most fascinating came from a white paper from Stanford University, and in this, it showed that 10 to 25% of variation in job performance is associated with differences in well-being. So what that means is, about a quarter of your overall effectiveness is determined by where you fall in terms of how well off you are in your mental and physical health. So we've talked now about a few of these big cost categories to consider. We've shown some data points that really understand, right? Like that this has some serious bottom line implications. What we want to leave off with is kind of on the flip side. Well, what is the ROI? What are the benefits here? And Deloitte actually conducted an in-depth review on the ROI of mental health intervention programs based on 23 case studies. They calculated an average ROI of $4 for each $1 spent, which is pretty incredible. And when they analyzed some of these more specific interventions, they found that proactive mental health support, which is in a lot of ways the stuff we do, actually returned on average $6 for every $1 spent. If you look at another one of the kind of most well-studied positive psychology programs and intervention, a few of their data points that they share, they had 50% increase in sales, a decrease in attrition from 12 to 3%. That was over 18 months, ended up saving the company about $1 million per year. One of the healthcare interventions they did, patient experience scores doubled in 12 months, transforming a $2 million operating loss to an $8 million profit. And one 50,000 employee multinational building materials company they did a positive psychology intervention with, found a 20% increase in engagement scores, which was the largest increase in any division. So I think what we want to leave off with in this video is asking, well, what would this do for you in your business? What would it mean to cut down on some of these big costs of mental illness, turnover, absenteeism, lost productivity? And what would it mean to have a 4-to-1 ROI, a 6-to-1 ROI, maybe a 10% increase in productivity, 20% increase in productivity? However you look at it, this intersection of happiness and business and organizations really does have serious bottom line impacts for your business, your organization as a whole, but also you yourself.
And I just want to say this one thing. Sometimes we feel like we're in a space where it's pink unicorns and cotton candy and all just foo-foo fun stuff to talk about, and it's all about how we should feel. And this data-rich summary that Jackson just shared shows that it goes so far beyond that. While there is all kinds of wonderful, good, happy feelings we want to be part of our work, the bottom line results for business are not just a little bit impressive. They may be the biggest point of leverage that a business could possibly invest in. ROIs of this magnitude that Jackson's just shared are just some of the biggest opportunities any business could look at. So I hope that's an encouragement to you as you work in your organizations to think about how to move forward on your best returns on investment.